Here at Outside, we've been talking for years about the fact that we should do a winter climbing layering video. Finally, nice snowy day in the Peak District, we've got round to doing that. There's a few little disclaimers I'd really like to talk about before I start rambling on, which I could do forever about layers. So, firstly, I'm talking about what works for me and what I like. Everybody's different. I often get really hot, which means I often get cold at belays and things. So do take it all with a pinch of salt. What I have found is most of the people I have climbed with in the past and peers I know and things like that sort of agree on a very similar layering system, so it's clearly quite proven. But please, 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 this is up to you to decide. It's just what I like. Also, the other thing I want to make quite clear is I'm talking about Scottish winter climbing, ice climbing, things like that. So not huge Himalayan stuff. I'm not talking about single axe easy routes where you're moving constantly. We'll get to that. I think of that more as like mountaineering. I'm talking about double axes, pitching the route, belaying, how you walk into the route and how you walk out, and the layers I use for that and being prepared for it. So please be aware of that, because there's lots of different variations on what we could call winter climbing. Another thing that I think is really important for everyone to know is the brands and us have been really guilty the last few years of telling everyone how amazing every product they make is for everything. Isn't it all really versatile? It's breathable and it's warm and it's waterproof and it packs small, blah, blah, blah. You need to learn how each layering system works. Obviously, us and the brands are trying to sell product, but if you use it in the wrong way, it just doesn't work well. Even the same layers you're wearing a different way around can make a massive difference to how they perform. So I'm sorry if we've bamboozled you in the past or whether the brands have, but hopefully this video can start explaining what works well, when it works well, who for and in what environment. Another thing worth explaining as well is if you have never been Scottish winter climbing or even ice climbing and don't understand what's involved in that, it can be quite complex, particularly Scottish winter climbing. So what that usually means is you walk in for a long way. You can start quite low down. Talk about climbing on Ben Nevis. You can start at sea level. It's often quite warm, maybe even raining and drizzly. You've got a best part of 3-hour walk to get to your route where you go through a whole list of elements and different weather forecasts and everything like that. And you need to be prepared for all of those things. Also, Scottish winter climbing, we don't wait for the perfect weather forecast because it's Scotland, you can't. Sometimes you've just got to suck it up, get out there and have a good time. But you won't if you're not prepared. What I found is a lot of the things used for Scottish winter climbing also will work for European ice climbing as well. Now, the main difference is there is often it's a lot drier. You probably don't go out on those horrendous days the same. What I don't want to talk about in this video is the big peaks and things like that. So Himalayan stuff, maybe even alpine stuff in the winter, really cold conditions, because you can use a lot of different gear there. A lot of it will equate to it, but it's also a different conversation. So we're talking about Scottish winter climbing, ice climbing, and UK stuff in general. So first thing, before I go into layering and all the different jackets I've got down here, you wait till I see what I've got down here. The only thing that is really warm in a layering system is dead airspace or dry airspace. All these things we're talking about, if you're soaking wet, go out the window. So you might even know about the legendary jacket by Patagonia called the Das Parker, dead airspace. That's what it means. If you can trap air in that is not wet, you can generally keep warm. So that's what we're trying to do with these layering systems here. I think it was Andy Kirkpatrick that famously said as well, it's actually pretty easy to stay warm in winter. You just wear all the clothes you own, huge big down jackets, blah, 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 all that sort of thing. The problem is once you move and create heat, you overheat, then you get wet. So it's about maintaining that balance. It's rare you're gonna go, God, I'm absolutely toasty warm all day. It's about keeping it just right. Right, last overview point, I promise, before I get my clothes off and show you what I'm wearing underneath. So last thing to think about is I'm going to do a straight off sort of example of if I could have one layering system for all weathers in Scotland, I'll show you what that is. Because not many people are as fortunate as me, work in a gear shop and get lots of kit. You might just have one setup that has to do you all winter long. So I'll show you what that is and the perfect way to do it, but obviously a lot of us who are really keen have different layers like soft shells versus waterproofs and when you might use them. I'll sort of cover that afterwards. Right, not looking forward to this. It's pretty cold. I'm gonna get down to my base layers. So here we are, the moment I've been worried about, standing in front of you all in my skinny base layers. I'm gonna start talking about the trousers first because I'm desperate to put something over the top of these. So if I only had one layering system, like I mentioned, the trouser I would wear is some kind of power stretch legging. Now, power stretch is a sort of fleece-like material that's fully synthetic with shiny on the outside, a bit like these. Now, Power Stretch itself is quite hard to get a hold of these days because it's by a brand called Polartec and the price is going up and up and up. So lots of brands are making their own. We do really well with a thing called the Rab Modulus pant. So do have a look out for that. But essentially, why are they so good? They wick moisture away really well. They're skinny and tight fitting so that you can pull them on and move and stretch really well. The outer is shiny so it moves nicely against the next layer. Now my next layer on my trousers would nearly always be a pair of Hardshell Over trousers. These are Tupolac pants. There's a classic, been out by Mountain Equipment for years, full Gore-Tex Pro. I'm not going to go into all the technicalities of Gore-Tex blah 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 because that's a whole nother video. But basically, why do I like these? They are completely waterproof. Whatever waterproof trousers you go for, I'm not saying it has to be Gore-Tex, but do look at how waterproof it is. So I'd go for a minimum of a hydrostatic head of 20,000 millimeters. Okay, again, read up on that, what that means another time. But basically, you will keep dry in those. Gore-Tex is really good because it keeps quite breathable as well, because sometimes you can be sweating hard. Another thing that's really worth considering is the fit. So they look a bit funny like this, but basically they have extra sort of space in them so they can lift my legs and I can bend in my knees, and also once I've got a harness on, they sort of hoik up a bit and the knees go into place. I also quite like having the braces because that means they come up really high and there's no need for a belt. Because if you can picture it, my harness is going to go about here, meaning that everything stays really nicely tucked in. Now, lots of other trousers out there are Gore-Tex as well. Now, the reason I think Gore-Tex Pro is the best to use out of the Gore-Texes is it's the most robust. So if you used a Packlight or Performance, do check on how durable the one you've got, because the denier face fabric will talk about that. The skinnier walking ones can often get ripped up. Bearing in mind you're going to wear crampons here, you could kick them and rip them. You can see down here I've got lots of patches. These are a bit tough and they will stand up to it a lot better. So like I mentioned, this would be my ideal setup if I could only have one. However, sometimes walking into, say, Ben Nevis again, it's quite a long way. I will actually, instead of my Power Stretch pants, wear my Kinesis pants by Mountain Equipment. Now, currently they don't make these. Something like the Rab Vaporized pant or Incline pant does a similar job. It's pile lined, it's really warm, it's very breathable, and it's quite thin fitting. That way you can walk up to the snow line without these things on, because no matter what happens, your waterproofs are the most sweaty thing you've got. And then when you hit the snow line, put your waterproof trousers over the top. If you're setting off walking in them, then there's no point in having the extra wind resistancy from these. You might as well have your Power Stretch leggings on. So top half, this is where it gets a bit complicated. So the first layer is your base layer. You should have that tight fitting because it's going to try and pull moisture away from the body. Now there's only a few different types of material you really want to use for that. It's generally between synthetic fibres or merino wool. So merino wool is warmer for its weight than synthetic fibres, so a lot of people love it in winter. However, synthetics move moisture quicker, so things like nylon and polyester. I usually prefer a slightly thicker version of a synthetic so I can get really sweaty on the walk-ins and it will dry off quicker. Something that I like doing, and a lot of people do this, if you can, it's sometimes hard on a really grim day, is walk all the way up to the base of the route and you'll have your top really sweaty. You can work really hard doing that. Bring a spare with you, change it, put a bone dry one on. It's a bit chilly for a minute when you're topless, but starting with something really fresh and really dry really helps for staying warm all day. Now remember, the only thing that's warm is the dead, dry airspace, so you're dry. So what I'm actually wearing now is the Montaineering Dart XT, I think it's called. This is actually a long sleeve. However, I always get really warm forearms, but I also like a zip neck because it keeps my neck nice and warm. Those don't really exist very much, so I actually cut the forearms off. I would say if you can't find the perfect thing for you, don't feel afraid to modify it because it works so much better. No one's going to make the ideal thing for you, so don't feel scared of changing it. Okay, on to the next layer. So what I normally wear next is a thin gridded fleece. Now I don't like them too thick here because I've got more layers to come. So again, synthetic fibres, the gridding helps moisture move away, so your moisture moves into the channels and pulls away quickly. Again, slim fitting is quite good, so it can all move a bit easier and pull moisture away. Again, really think about whether it fits in. You can move your arms really well, because you are going to be climbing, remember that. Ones I really like have thumb loops like this and always have a hood. Because actually I don't usually wear a hat, I'll show you in a minute. I much prefer to climb with a hood up because it's sort of like wearing a balaclava and it protects your neck from spindrift. Always fits nicely under a helmet as well. Other really good examples of this are the real classic Patagonia R1, been around for years, lasts forever. This is actually an old Arc'teryx Covert, I think it was called. Can't remember, they don't make it at the moment. Maybe a Conceal. Our probably bestseller in the shop these days is the Mountain Equipment Eclipse, because it's got a really high neck with an off-cut zip, so it sort of covers your face up really snugly and warm. Now what I like about this layer is it sort of tucks everything in. As you can see, I go into the trousers here. These will go under my gloves. My hood is going to go under my helmet. And if you get a good one like the Eclipse or find something like this, they have face protectors as well, which is nice to be able to pull up and down when the weather comes in and out. As you can see, I now look like a ninja, but I really like this because it goes all the way under my helmet. Don't get snow down the back of my neck. These are going in my gloves. And this built-in face bit, which I say they don't make this anymore, but things like this, like the Eclipse, is great. Take it down when you're climbing, put it up when you're belaying or the wind comes. Works really nicely. So this is moving moisture, covering all the gaps, but it's not offering too much warmth. So on to my next layer. So this layer is what gives me the insulation. So again, synthetic fibers, no down here, because remember the down gets wet and soggy and collapses. But it's breathable. So there's loads of synthetic jackets out there. Everyone gets a bit confused with these because they all say they're warm, they all say they're breathable. Generally, the rule of thumb is if it's a matte fabric like this is the Arc'teryx Proton from years ago, they don't make this currently. It's built for breathability, usually a tougher face fabric, works really well for layering because it's going to go under a shell in a minute. But I can move really well and I don't overheat, but it does trap quite a bit of warmth in, but not too much. The shiny ones, which I'll show you in a minute, are more for like belay jackets and compressibility, are built to trap all your hot air in and can be really warm. And you can quite possibly overheat, which will lead to sweating, which can lead to getting cold again when you slow down. So something like this is great. This is the old Proton. Other ones I really like the old thing down here. Again, don't make this anymore, but I used to love it. This was the Rab Alpha Direct, I think it was called. Other amazing things at the moment are like the Rab Zen Air. If you don't have something quite like this, you want a little bit thinner, I also recommend the Rab Vaporized Summit. There's also the Kinesis or Switch Pro from Mountain Equipment. Again, pile lined, really breathable, good mid layers. Now, I think what's important about this is you quite often will walk about in it. When you do finish and you're walking back down, the first thing you'll take off is your shell, which we'll do in a minute, because that can be quite sweaty and you don't want that on. So it's quite important that this is windproof and water resistant and still quite warm but breathable. Right, on to the next layer. So here we are, ready to climb. This is your shell layer. Once again, the most important thing about this is it keeps you dry. Remember, all those things underneath, if they were soaking wet, pretty much pointless. You're going to be freezing. So the only thing that's warm is the dead air space. So let's keep you dry. Again, most people probably go for Gore-Tex or Gore-Tex Pro like this. Now, again, it doesn't have to be Gore-Tex, but do make sure it's very waterproof, minimum of 20,000 hydrostatic head. But do bear in mind, it's got to be breathable. You're going to work really hard. As you can already see, I've got quite a lot of layers on. I usually find when I get climbing, I do get quite hot. So you're wondering why have you got so many on? Well, because I'm then going to stand on a belay for 2 hours. And even though we're going to talk belay jackets in a minute, you still want quite a lot under that. Another really important thing to think about with your jacket is, does it fit? You've got to climb, you've got to stick your arms up in the air, straight with axes. If you get caught in your harness and you can't put your arms up, you can't climb. What's really frustrating is if you have a jacket where it pulls out the harness and then you end up with a big ballooning amount of material here, you can't see down and you can't see your gear. When you're flustered, when you're scared, you want to be able to see your gear. So jackets we really like to climb in, things like the Hagloff Spitz, which is really cool, lots of fun colours. Absolute mega classic. Sorry, it's probably very rustly, but this is the Tupolak from Mountain Equipment, tried and tested, had this for years, still going strong. The Alpha range from Arc'teryx, again, really light, really durable, very waterproof. What you'll notice with all of these is they don't have hand pockets. Big chest pockets, because you're going to want to get your map, you're going to want to get your guidebook, you want to get gloves, things like that. You're not putting your hands in your pockets, you're not going to go feed the ducks, you're not walking your dog. You need to get your gear and everything else is just faff, so get rid of it. So that's why jackets like this work really well. Of course, really important is the hood. It's got to go over a helmet. We climb in helmets all the time. So you want to be able to pull it up nice and snug, stays with you, moves around so that you can see what you're doing. A little peak's often quite nice sitting over the helmet there so the snow doesn't get in your eyes, but you do need to be able to move. Again, some great jackets out there that might not have helmet hoods, and you might not find out until you're on pitch 2, and then you're in trouble. So the durability of these jackets has got to be quite high. This is what we're climbing in. Scottish winter climbing, you are often against rock. You've got spiky things in your hand. They can rip if they're too fragile. You don't want it too heavy, but you also need it durable. Most brands go from sort of 40 to 80 denier in their face fabrics. Usually around 70, 80 is the standard for winter climbing jackets. So I'm climbing, I'm protected, I'm dry, I'm currently warm, but I'm about to end up on a belay ledge for a couple of hours. Let's get ready. So here we are, we've reached the belay. We've just led our pitch, we're quite warm and sweaty and thinking, gosh, I'll never be cold ever again. However, I would warn you, put your belay jacket on now. You're creating lots of heat, try and trap it in. So belay jackets are things that squish down really small, live in your bag, clip to your harness and go over all those other layers we've just talked about. So they need to fit, they need to be bigger than all those layers. So belay jackets for Scottish winter climbing and probably ice climbing as well are nearly always synthetic fibres. I know in Europe they use a lot of down, but once again we'll talk about the fact that in Scotland it's wet and down can collapse, lose its warmth, so synthetic fibres generally rule the roost. The options I think you sort of have is to go for something like I like this, the Aureus jacket, really quite light. Why I like it being light is the fact I always take it with me. Some of the bigger, bulkier ones are warmer, but often when I'm packing my bag, I just go, I can't be bothered, this is just too much, and then I'll end up not taking anything. So this offers a lot of warmth for quite a small pack size. Usually, if I'm trying a harder route with my friends or something like that, we might just take one rucksack up the route. Now, I always suggest be really careful if you're doing that. You've got to make sure you can easily get back to your bag without having to go down a dangerous gully or something like that. So only do that if it fits. Now, if you're taking one rucksack, you can probably mean the leader can climb without a rucksack and the second wears the belay jacket. So make sure if you're swapping one belay jacket between two, it fits the bigger person out the two because it's got to go over all of you. Belay jackets are generally strip fibre, so that means there's no gaps, there's no stitching, nowhere that the wind can get in or your hot air can get out. They're not built to breathe, they're trapping in everything you can create and keeping you as warm as you can. So you want to make sure you can get a big hood on there. It needs to have a two-way zip so you can still belay in it as well and get to your belay device. Like I mentioned before, there's so many different variations on all this type of kit and it'll depend on the route you're doing. I sometimes think I would take a bigger belay jacket like the Arc'teryx Nuclei SV. This is a beast. So if you think the one I'm wearing now weighs 390 grams, this weighs 600 grams. So not quite double its weight, but a fair bit more. I would say it's quite a fair bit warmer as well though. So if you think you're in for your longest belay of your life because your mate's trying his hardest mixed route he's ever done, I might suck up a bit more weight. No, I'm wearing that for the belay when I'm stood there for hours and being really nice and warm. And you only have to second with it on you as well, so not too bad. Now you'll often see quite a lot of footage or photos of people climbing in a jacket like this. Now that is okay, but I have a little bit of a worry. If you're wearing everything you've got with you while doing your activity, so you're working the hardest, you're creating the most heat you can, and you're wearing everything you own, what are you going to do when you stop, when it all goes wrong, when the weather gets worse, when you get to the top? You need to have something ready for when you're stationary. If you're wearing it all then, what's going to happen when you stop? You need to be ready for that. So usually this is in my bag and it'll come on for the belays and the summit, but I don't like to have to climb in it. If I do, I'm getting a bit worried. So it's hard not to talk about gloves when you're talking about Scottish winter climbing. Now, I'm going to keep this pretty short because I reckon I could do a whole hour-long video on gloves. However, simple things. I think you can't go Scottish winter climbing with any less than 3 pairs of gloves. It can seem overkill, but I'll explain my reasoning why. So when I'm walking into the route, it's often cold enough to need gloves, but not cold enough to need my thick, warm gloves. Even if it was, I wouldn't want to wear them because I'll probably get so sweaty from the walk-in that they'll get cold very quickly when I start climbing. So have a pair that you can just walk in, you can do your laces in, you can do your crampons in, really thin, nimble, dexterous, something like this sort of liner glove I've got here. Often I find these end up getting binned off for the rest of the day because they might be wet and sweaty by then. They'll go in my bag and I might not wear them again. So the next glove, now this is still got to be dexterous, you've got to be able to do things, hold an ice axe, get your carabiners, all that sort of thing, but it's got to be warm, generally waterproof. I do like soft shell ones too because they dry quicker, but you need to be able to do what you can with this. It needs to be moderately thick, it's got to keep you warm, but it can't be so thick you can't do anything. This is your main climbing glove. A bit like we did with clothing, when I get to the belay, I will often take these off because they might be warm, sweaty and a bit damp by then. I will take them off. I'll often shove them in my jacket as close to my body as I can, so under a couple of layers they can start warming, drying, getting ready for the next time I climb. And then I might well put on my belay mitt. Now my belay mitt is basically huge. This is the BD Mercury mitt. It's a classic, waterproof, huge, pile lined, really warm. It's got little eyelets here so I can clip it to the back of my harness if I'm not taking a rucksack, and it's so warm in there. And you can still nimble enough that you can actually belay, but I couldn't climb in it. What I really like with all my gloves is to have what I call idiot loops on them. So I can put it like that. If I need to take them off, do anything, I can drop them and they won't fall to the base of the crag. On dropping it, the note of it, that's one of the reasons I think you have to have multiple pairs of gloves. You might think you can climb all day in the same one, but what if you drop one of your gloves? You're either getting frostbite or you're going down, and what a shame. If you've got spares, you're ready for anything. Sometimes if I was getting a bit specialist on the route, I might take other gloves as well. So I've got something like the hard mix glove or the direct glove, I think it's called, for mountain equipment. A little bit skinnier than my main climbing glove, really dexterous. Sometimes not fully waterproof, so a bit more nimble. Nearly always pile line. Pile lining sort of slips onto your hand even when wet. So they're really good, and that's for sort of the get out of jail pitches when I'm a bit scared and I just want to climb hard. Maybe not worry about how warm I am. And lastly, it's really worth mentioning the over mitt. Now, again, say you're about to lead a quite hard pitch, but it's the first pitch and you're going up a snow slope to the base of it and you've got your techie gloves on. Last thing you want to do is get your main climbing glove completely soaked and wet in the snow slope on the approach. So sometimes I will wear this over the top of whatever glove I'm going to climb in just to get up to the base. It's amazing how much warmer you are keeping your hand away from the snow, keeping nice and dry, and they can just pull off. They weigh next to nothing, go in your jacket, clip to your harness, and you've got a warm, dry glove ready to climb. Last thing to mention on gloves, when trying in the shop, they might go on easily. When you're a bit cold, everything's a bit damp, everything can feel really hard to get on, so don't get them too tight. Also, like I mentioned before, big thick pile like this can slide on really nicely when damp. Sometimes some more of the like rib type ones can be quite sticky and hard to get on. So I mentioned at the beginning, there can be lots of variations on weather and the type of climbing you're going to do in Scotland. So one of the variations I want to mention is if it's a definitely hard shell type of day, you're walking in them, you're wearing them all day, it's damp, often a little bit warmer than primo conditions. There's not actually any need for your mid layer, like the Proton or the Zen Air or whatever we talked about, having that wind resistancy, because you're never going to take this off. So if you get rid of the wind resistancy from your mid layer, it can breathe even better. So that's when I might like something like a pile style mid layer. So this is Polartec Alpha. It's a really good jacket from Haglofs, can't remember the name. So Polartec Alpha or Power Stretch makes a really good warm breathable layer. The reason you don't always wear that is, again, when this comes off, you'll be really cold. If you know you're staying it on, the pile works really well, lofts up, keeps your insulation trapped in by the shell, keeps you nice and warm while breathing well. And so here's the polar opposite variation that I'd use in my layering system. This is for those bluebird days. There's not a cloud in the sky, non-forecast at all, but you're still going winter climbing. It's still going to be cold, icy, and possibly a bit damp once you start rubbing up against those ice falls. This is the kind of soft shell setup. Now, please be careful doing this because it's kind of quite risky. If it all goes wrong and the weather comes that you didn't know was coming, you can get really caught out because this isn't waterproof. It's very water resistant, it's tough, you can stretch well in it and move much more freely, but you've just got to know it's going to be an okay day. So I don't get to do this very often, but when I do, it's usually end of the season, sort of late March, April sort of weather, where we might be romping up some ice falls on the Ben, and actually it just works really nicely. Again, like I say, it's more of a luxury sort of layering system. You're that keen on winter climbing that you go out whatever the weather and you can do multiple different days. If you've only got one setup, go with that first one I showed you. A couple of other tips I really just want to mention, even though it feels like it's separate to the layering system, is what I do for the approaches. Because like I mentioned earlier, particularly walking into Ben Nevis or some of these high mountain crags, it's a long way. You can get really sweaty and you don't know where you're climbing gear on the way in. So sometimes what I do is I'll walk in just a base layer, but the wind can be too much and I might get a bit chilly. So I will bring something like a Squamish. This is an Arctic Squamish. You can buy a sort of Rab or a mountain equipment or anything windproof. Pack's really, really small, but it's really breathable, takes the edge off. Often this will be soaked by the time I get to the base of the route with sweat, maybe even a bit of a shower that's come through, and I will bin it off. If you end up leaving something in your rucksack all day or at the base of the route, why not have the lightest thing you can? If you end up walking in your waterproof, it does mean whatever you're wearing is probably going to get sweaty and wet. What I actually did the last few years that worked really well is I had a thin thing like this. This is the Aerotherm by Mountain Equipment, or you could have the really light Vaporized from Rab, something like that. I actually wore that against the skin. So this has got that thin bit of gridding on the inside to help keep some warmth and move moisture away, but it's got a windproof outer on it. So against the skin, it moved moisture well. Admittedly, it got a bit sweaty when I got to the base of the route. Sometimes I left it in the bag, binned it off for the day, put more warm dry layers on. But what also worked quite well is to then take this off, put my base layer on, maybe even another lofting layer like that insulating pile I showed you, and put this back on top again. That means the wetness of this is not touching me, and when my hot air starts coming through, it dries it, and before I know it, halfway up the route, it's bone dry and I'm warm again. Another little tip I'd like to share with you as well, it comes to sort of the neck area and face warming area. So like I mentioned before, I really like the jackets with hoods, and maybe they've got an inbuilt or really high sort of snood in the mid layer. If you haven't got one of those, you don't have to go and buy a new one. You probably already own a sort of buff or something like that. Now it seems quite obvious, wear a buff, you put it up over your face, keeps you nice and warm, pull it down again. But nearly always throughout the day, it disappears under your helmet and into the mid layer, and with gloves on, you just can't get it and pull it on your face. And this happens. So this is what I would do. So it may look a bit dorky and a bit weird, but if you pull your buff onto the outside over your hood and then put your helmet on, it just makes it much, much easier to access your snood or your buff, because it's not getting stuck under your mid layer. So you can get it up and down all day without getting it lost in there. So I kind of wanted to briefly explain how I might layer slightly different for winter mountaineering. Now again, I want to explain what that means, because obviously mountaineering could be Everest. That's not what we're talking about here. What I mean by mountaineering is we're not pitching the climb. You might not even put a rope on for the day. So really easy routes, probably crampons, probably an axe, things like that, but you might well not have a rope out, and if you do, it's not out for long, you're moving together, terrain like that. The main reason I think this differs is there's much less standing around. So the high activity, the bit where you're hot, is what happens a lot of the day. However, you probably don't get quite as hot because you don't have that moment of panic. I've got to pull really hard. I'm trying my hardest here. You're walking along, you're moving slowly and continuously throughout the day. So that means you maybe have quite a few layers on, but not loads. And you probably don't need a big, huge belay jacket. So again, you have to take it day by day. If it's a really bad weather day, you're going in those full waterproof you've talked about, probably Gore-Tex top and bottom or something like that, and they'll be on for the day. Probably with the power stretch leggings and fleecy mid layer, something like that. That will keep you dry, keep moving, but not too sweaty. I think what you'll often find is most people will go and choose to have a day like that when the weather is a bit better. So you are quite possibly in your soft shell trousers like I'm wearing now, maybe in your soft shell top. Doesn't mean you cannot take a waterproof with you. You do need to have one of those with you if there's anything bad in the forecast. That thing can save your life. Being dry is what the name of the game is here. So let's say we've got waterproofs with us or we're wearing them. What will change on my mid layers? So I'd probably have the same base layer on. What probably wouldn't change is I probably wouldn't change it when I got to the snow line. I'd probably leave it on because that pace is continuous throughout the day. Is probably the next layer, which I think would be the biggest change. Those things I talked about that are now lying down there, the big fat warm protons or alpha directs, things like that. They may be too warm if you're continually walking up a hill all day. I think on these mountaineering days, my mid layer would probably be a choice of something like the Aerotherm, the Rab Vaporize, the sort of light proton they do in the summer from Arc'teryx. These things move moisture really well, whether it's under my shell or if it's a really nice day just over my base layer. They protect me from the elements and I could keep moving all day. On these mountaineering days, you might not end up pitching anything, so there might not be any belaying. Doesn't mean you don't need a belay jacket. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, you've just got to have something with you for the top when it's cold, when you have your lunch, when you twist your ankle, when you basically get too cold. So I'd probably take one of the lighter ones. Again, I'd probably choose the Aureus or something like that. The big Arc'teryx Nucleus V is beautiful, but it might be too much considering you might not even put it on. I do really want to stress that I'm not suggesting you don't take all the warm gear you need, because last thing you're going to do is still freeze to death because you haven't got the right stuff with you. Just do bear in mind, high activity all day rather than stop-start like you do when you're climbing. Gloves for this sort of easier mountaineering, I don't think you need as many, and you probably don't need big fat belay gloves, and you also don't need your super techie hard mixed glove either. What you could probably get away with is having your big fat warm ones which you'd wear most of the day, a liner, and possibly something else to back it up in case you drop a glove basically. All of this means you can have a much lighter bag than when you're going actual mixed climbing or ice climbing. So really enjoy moving in the hills at a faster pace and feel light and nimble, but still warm and still protected. So I realise I've just rambled on for ages about layering, but if I'm honest, I could have gone for so much longer. I've got so much more I want to tell you, but probably bore you to death. What I think would be really interesting is if you could just let me know what you think, how your layering works, put your messages down in the comments, because this is just what I like. This is how it works for me. I really want to know some bigger systems like Buffalo Pile and stuff like that people are still using and works really, really, really well. I hope you like this video, and if you do and you find it informative, give us a like, maybe subscribe, and we'll try and keep these things coming.